Joined today by Macy Yates, RaeAnne, Thayne, and Melissa Sennett. Thank you guys so much. We have a little bit of housekeeping just to get started. So this wonderful webinar panel is presented by Harlequin. And I just wanted to give everyone a little bit of information about Harlequin. So we're all familiar and we love Harlequin, and this past year they celebrated 70 years of publishing romance, so truly since the beginning. They have offices in countries around the world, and for this anniversary, a study that Harlequin conducted with thousands of readers reaffirmed what the company always believed, that Harlequin romances make readers feel uplifted, inspired, and empowered. They call it that Harlequin feeling. So I think we've all had that, felt that, and certainly written those kinds of stories. They have an imprint called Series. Harlequin is also an innovator of the series romance model. For anyone who doesn't know, Harlequin series is made up of 12 romance lines that range from historical romance, mystery, and suspense to contemporary and inspirational romance. 66 new novels are published each month. And I know some of you listening in could probably read that many in a month. And readers can even subscribe to receive their favorite lines delivered directly to their homes and e-readers. Oh, that is very cool. I did not know that, and I will be checking that out. Harlequin's single title has redefined romance by publishing the best in mainstream bestseller romance by the finest authors in the field, from rising stars to romance royalty. In 2019, Harlequin Books placed over 40 titles on the bestseller list, demonstrating that it offers something for every romance fan across all formats. And finally, Karina Adores is the latest addition to Harlequin's romance offering, and they just launched this past June, which we're all very, very excited about over here at Frolic. It is the first romance line from a major publishing house to offer category-style romances, exclusively featuring main characters from the LGBTQ+ communities, finding their happily ever afters. Excuse me. Karina Adores novels are filled with heartwarming scenes of characters getting to know each other over witty banter, falling in love, and overcoming central conflicts that aren't focused on the main characters' identities. So again, very, very excited about that. And just a final note before we jump into the panel, Harlequin is doing a gift with purchase opportunity today. So anyone who purchased the latest novel from one of the Harlequin authors participating in the panels today, and we have 3 wonderful ones here. And if you go into the chat, there is a link to click to buy. And if you do, you will get a free ebook from Harlequin through that link in the chat. So thank you, Harlequin, for giving us this time and space to talk with 3 wonderful authors. I am going to introduce everybody and then just jump right into questions. So we're going to have a good time. And then please feel free to throw questions into that chat box there, because we will have some time at the end and I will go ahead and read some questions. So as things come up, as we're talking, just chat and we will try to get to as many as we can. So RaeAnne, Thayne, you are a New York Times bestselling author. You find inspiration in the beautiful northern Utah mountains where you live with your family. I am also from Utah, so we have that. Yay! I live in Los Angeles now, but really consider Utah my home, and it is very inspiring, and we're going to get into that because your books are many books, and you can tell that they are inspired by the beauty of where you live. You have won numerous authors, including 6 Rita Award nominations from the Romance Writers of America and Career Achievement and Romance Pioneer Awards from RT Book Reviews. Very, very deserved. You have written so many books. Can you just talk about how you get inspiration outside of the beautiful place that you live? And you know, how long does it take you to write each book? You write so many. Can you just talk a little bit about your process from
I'm not fast. I'm not fast. I mean, there are a lot of other authors who are a lot faster than I am, but my process is basically I just try to look around everywhere for an idea. Every time I'm reading anything online, anytime I'm, watching a TV show or whatever, I just think, oh, I could take that in a certain direction. I used to be a newspaper editor, so I was able to I was the news editor, and I'd have to read every story that came across the wire. I'm still pretty much a news junkie. I read a lot of news stories, and I just write them all down if I come up with something I think I can take in a direction. My books all start with character. I think that's kind of universal in romance. The books start with, I come up with the people first and figure out where do they need to go, how do they need to get there, what do they need to learn by the end of the book, and what are some ways I can get them there. And from that point, I just sit down and plot, and I have a plot group. We get together and plot, help each other plot each other's books, and that basically is my process. Usually I've been writing some bigger books. The hardcover books take me about 5 months. A category romance is about 2 to 3 months, so like a 55,000 word book is about that long. And I am still writing for special edition. That's the next book on my plate is a special edition, but longer books take about 4 months, and then the really long books take about 5.
That's still very fast. Like sometimes it takes me that long to send an email. I'm always just so impressed with authors who can, find that inspiration. What is that? Can you think of a time that was just like, you saw a news story and then it turned into a book? Like what was sort of the craziest moment of inspiration?
Well, that's happened many times, but most recently, well, actually probably the most obvious one is one of my very first books. I was a newspaper reporter or editor at the time, and I saw a story about doctors who follow the rodeo circuit. And I thought that would be a great idea for a book. And actually it was a kind of a woman in hiding who had she was a doctor, and she needed a way to kind of escape from a situation she was in. And so she became a doctor on the rodeo circuit. And then an FBI agent went on undercover to find her. And that was the story idea.
Oh, so good. I love it. Thank you so much.
Long time ago. That was like 25 years ago that I wrote that book.
Wait, what book? So what book was it?
It was The Wrangler and the Runaway Mom is the title that they came up with.
Love it. So Macy Yates is a New York Times bestselling author who lives in rural Oregon, where it's very hot currently. We were just talking about it's breaking 100, so feel for her. That's why she's not drinking hot tea on our afternoon tea here. She lives there with her 3 children and her husband, whose chiseled jaw and arresting features continue to make her swoon. We'll have to hear more about that. She feels the epic trek she takes several times a day from her office to her coffee maker is a true example of her pioneer spirit. So we appreciate that, and your coffee addiction we also share in common. So Macy, talk to us. Your books range from sort of dark and passionate to light and fluffy. So how do you switch between those two? And do you find that your fan base is similar for both of them, or are you attracting different audiences for both sort of stuff?
It's funny because that line is from my bio, and when I look at it now, I'm like, I think that's a mischaracterization or an oversimplification. But what I will say is that, and it's my own bad choice of words. It's like, I would say that the thing is that whether I'm writing like Harlequin Presents, which is very high fantasy, and there you have like these heroes that are like not bound by the rules of society at all. They're almost like paranormal heroes or historical heroes in some ways, set in a contemporary kind of time, and the heroines tend to be maybe a little more contemporary, but they're not really like bound by the rules. Whereas like one of my cowboy heroes like is very firmly like entrenched in the real world. So they're very much all like kind of alpha hero type characters, but like there's different rules, I guess, to me for the world building that goes into each book. So like RaeAnne said, for me, everything comes from character. So the tone of a Presents like becomes angsty because you have these kind of larger than life characters that are in more of a fantasy space. Whereas it's natural for me for the tone to shift in the cowboy books, and like there's a little more humor in front of the angst, because for me, that's like very real world. That's how we deal with things, you know, so you put that kind of humor in front of things, and that's where kind of my own characterization of it being light, but there's a lot of heavy themes in those books as well, but they're more grounded I guess, kind of in the real world, because they're written more in my real world. They're written more in small towns like I live in Oregon. So that rather than like a private island like that doesn't actually exist, populated by the king of a country that doesn't exist. So it's like, for me, the tone flows kind of from character and their conflict and their situations. And I would say that in terms of readers, in general, I feel like romance readers like what they like. And so for some of them, yeah, absolutely, there's crossover because what they like is the author voice. Some of them like royalty and they're never going to read a cowboy. They're like, why would I read a cowboy? I want to read a king. And some of them are like, well, I don't want something that's like that out there. I want this like real world experience. So I think it just depends on the reader and what they like. But I always love it when a reader will try something really far outside their comfort zone and then be pleasantly surprised that they enjoyed it. But for the most part, I think, you know, they're kind of fans of what they're fans of. And if that's of me, then maybe they'll read all of it. But if it's like me when I write this, then it's going to be, you know, and usually it's about that hero for them. So do they want the cowboy hero or do they want the kind of the king hero? And that is kind of what dictates the reading choice.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. Like I do find as a romance reader, like I kind of like have my lanes that I stick to, but I do like to explore outside. So if I like an author and she writes something outside of, you know, what I normally like, I do enjoy that because I'm like, okay, I trust this author's voice and it's something that maybe I normally wouldn't pick up, but I'm going to because I like that voice. So you kind of give your readers sort of a variety of things to pick from. I love that. Melissa Sennett made the switch from fiction editor in New York City to romance author and hasn't looked back since. Since then, she's had a variety of amazing experience, including being an author of over 30 novels. Again, just cannot express how impressed I am with how many books you all have written. And having a book to movie adaptation, which we definitely want to hear more about, and acting as a ghostwriter for several novels, including one for a major celebrity who we don't get to know because of NDA clauses and what have you, but I'm sure that was a really interesting experience. So I would love to hear, Melissa, what your experience of having a book turned into a movie was like. How much control did you have? Did you want? How did your fans react? What was that experience like for you?
Well, the experience, it was just a magical dream, like unexpected. I couldn't believe it. It happened with my debut novel. Like it was right out of the gate. It was just amazing. And the experience was wonderful. I didn't have any control over the process whatsoever. Not the script or the production, nothing. And I understood from the get-go that the movie would be someone else's vision of the book. And I figured if they wanted to make this book into a movie, they probably would honor the vision or the spirit of the book, and they absolutely did. I mean, it really captured the spirit of the book, and I just loved it. I loved the movie, and you know, it's a book about dating, and there are so many actors and actresses in that movie, like, and they're all actors and actresses you've seen like over the past 30 years. So that was just so much fun. Like I was in college in the mid 80s and I had the Calvin Klein underwear models poster on my wall in my dorm room. And he was in the movie, like just crazy fun stuff like that. Like Zachary Levi was in the movie, Linda Dano, just so many fun people. So it was just wonderful.
Did you get to go to set? Were you on set the whole time?
I wasn't invited. I've heard now, like when books are made into movies, a lot of authors are invited to the set. But this was a while ago. This was 2003.
Oh wow.
Yeah, this was eons ago.
Yeah, that's I think definitely in a time when romance wasn't as, you know, was sort of having a lull. It was the beginning of kind of the lull, and we're seeing it coming back into mainstream and film and TV and Netflix and their Summer of Love and their Christmas movies and everything, which we're so excited about. So definitely want to hear more about that. And then just briefly to introduce myself, my name is Sarah Panna. I'm the co-founder of Frolic Media. We are an entertainment brand for modern romance fans. So if you go to frolic.media, we have daily content, we have a podcasting network, and we're also in development on several movies and TV shows that are, based on romance novels that we love. And we're huge romance novel fans, so always love having the opportunity to talk to romance authors. So you guys all kind of touched on a theme of, you start with characters, but then you have to set the characters in a world. Can you guys each talk about how do you develop that world, whether it is, realistic and set in the real world, or, a small town that doesn't exist, or whatever it might be? How do you construct those worlds? And we can just go in the same order.
Okay. Well, I write basically fictitious towns in real states. So I never base it on an actual place. Many times I'll combine 2 or 3 different small towns that I know and create a town with some of those characteristics. When I'm starting in a new place, I try to brainstorm what could make this community unique. What are some of the things that they do? What are some challenges facing the people in this community? Where geography, what, do I want it on a lake? Do I want it on the ocean? Do I want it none of those things in the mountains? Basically what are some of the parameters that I want to set in my playground that I might use somewhere in a future book in the series. And unlike a lot of authors, I usually don't have the whole series mapped out. I know what's happening in this particular book. I might know what's happening in the next book or the next book, but if I like for my Hope's Crossing or my Haven Point book that I just had the last one, Summer in Haven Point is my last book in that series. The first 2 or 3 books, I knew where I was going. After that, it was all, organic. As I was writing the series, I would get ideas for the next book. So I don't know how the rest of you work, but that's my process.
That's great. Thank you.
Very similar to RaeAnne. What I do is, it's like a few books at a time, and then now I always feel like I'm adding a ranch over here and adding a ranch over there because I write Cowboys, so we're always like adding ranch land. I'm like, what? Totally. There's another one there. It's fine. And then I have to figure out how they're not in competition with each other, which is always fun. But there's layers of kind of that world building, because for me, my initial series was based off of a couple small coastal towns in Oregon, Copper Ridge, and then I've moved now to Gold Valley, which is based a lot more on where I live. It's a more like inland part of Oregon, and so it's like the scenery is even like more familiar to me, and so and the main street of town is very much based off of the Gold Rush town that I live near. So I'm very much like entrenched in that like small town with the cute main street, and it's very like, so that's very real to me. And you kind of like know everybody, and actually like, no, people aren't that nice, but you have to be nice to them because you're going to see them again, and like probably like their dad is going to sign your loan papers later, and so you have to like kind of figure out how you're going to deal with people that you don't necessarily like or disagree with. And so those are the kinds of layers that I like to put into small towns, even though they're fictitious, is kind of my experience of growing up in one. And where like here where I live, my dad, his name is Carrie, and like he's lived here since he was a child, and so I'm like, I'm Carrie's daughter. Like that's who I am when I go somewhere. Or I'm like Haven's wife because people all know my husband because he's friendlier than I am, and like just those kinds of things, and how you are defined in the place you live. And like those are the kind of the details, the real world details that I like to put in there. And otherwise I like kind of an idealized, like cute version of it, because that's what you want to step into. And so those are the kinds of things, like I build that like physical world and then focus on those little like fun details. And with Presents, it's fun because, I just get to make stuff up. Like seriously, I'm like, it's a kingdom on the top of a mountain and it's in Europe and you've never heard of it, but it's there. And like, these are the rules there. And so obviously he has to get married because I said so. So there's a godlike quality to setting up a world in Presents that I love. And then I've noticed with women's fiction, which I write also, I do kind of set up the towns in the same way I do. They're also fictitious towns, but I have gone and stayed in a lot of historic houses while doing research for that, and the history of the specific buildings has become a lot more important in those books. So yeah, it just depends on kind of the focus, I think, of the world, but mostly it's liking to be the god of my own universe. So they're all made up.
I love that. And Melissa, how about you?
Yeah, it's similar to both. I guess I'm very interested in family dynamics, and I really like to focus there. Brothers, sisters, best friends, frenemies. Just I am obsessed with Wyoming as a setting, and I set all my Harlequin special editions in this small town in Wyoming, where I've never been, but I love researching it. And so I have my small town, and I just love to populate it with family. So you have the family at the diner, the aunt working there, and all that. So I sort of go from there, from starting at a family perspective.
So Melissa, my family has some land in rural Wyoming, so you're going to have to come write your next book out there. Get it very authentic. It is so true. Like, it is very much about there. It's, you do know everybody. Everyone knows, like, when I'm in the little town, even though I didn't grow up there, I'm like, oh, I'm Gary's daughter. And everyone's like, oh, we know him. Like, you do have that thing that you don't get in an urban setting. And you all write books that, for the most part, you write books that take place in small towns. I think right now, especially those of us stuck in these big cities, are sort of questioning why we live here, and sort of intrigued by more rural settings, and sort of craving that connectedness and that small town feel. And while maybe we can't get that in real life, like, we can kind of escape into books. What do you guys think, not just now, but for a long time, romance and that small town feel have really gone hand in hand. What do you think attracts readers to that as a location, and as something to escape to?
Do you want to do the same order again? Okay. Well, for me, I think it is because I saw the real growth in small town romance probably about 10 or 15 years ago. And that was, I believe, when people started being on social media more and things like that, and really connecting on a kind of superficial level. And I think people yearned for that deeper connection that you get living in a small town. That was my perspective anyway, that I was seeing reader responses from people who loved that idea of having a neighbor that they could call on, because they didn't really feel like they had that in their own lives at that particular point. As far as the romance side of it, I think it's just, there's something just so, I like romance anywhere. I like it in London. I like them set in New York. I like them set in, some mythical kingdom on a mountain. But, it's just, for me, I think it works for me just because I write about what I know, and I live in a small town, and I see, people living their lives and facing challenges and overcoming them. And those are the characters that I like to write about.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's funny because I think that's been something that I have had to think about, like, what attracts people to small town, because the reason I write it, like, I didn't start, like, my first romances that I wrote were for Harlequin Presents, which is, of course, that very high fantasy. Like I said, although mine do tend to go from whatever major city they're in to an isolated place, because for me, that's glamour. I'm like, it's a nice house, but it's on a mountain. Like, I don't really want to be down in the middle, but that's because I'm born and raised in a small town. So while I like to visit cities, I do find them a little overwhelming. And so for me, when I was getting into writing kind of contemporary single title romance, small town felt natural to me, because I remember going, and even when I was talking about writing women's fiction, and I had an editor say to me, oh, you could write one of the rom-coms and you could set it here. And I was like, I don't even know how you get groceries in New York City, though. I don't have anything to offer to that. I have no authenticity to bring to the table. This is what I know, is this kind of small town living. And so one thing that I love about it as a writer is the opportunities to create, like, sticky situations with the connections that you have with all these people. And, like, that even if you don't know this person, you might have a connection with them here, or they know this person over there, and like all the ways that kind of creates conflict. And so I think there's so much truth to what RaeAnne said about what brings readers to it. And then you know, and that's, like I said, something that I had to kind of go, why do people like that? Because that's just like life for me. Yeah, it's what I love as a writer is all those connections. Like the book that I'm working on right now is kind of a joke on the small town thing. The heroine moves to town from California, and she's not used to small towns. She hooks up with the hero and is continually running into him. She thinks, I'm going to have a one-night stand with this guy and never see him again. And of course she sees him everywhere. And it turns out that he's related to her brother's wife. So they have to see each other at all these things. And I was like, cause that's how it is. Like, you never escape anybody. And you're like, oh, right, that guy, there he is walking down. Hey, what's up? So that was kind of, so I like those things, those kinds of weird, awkward situations that you find yourselves in because you are in like the same little radius with these people all the time.
I love that. I mean, it is that like Grey's Anatomy first episode thing where you're like, oh, I didn't realize that's who I was hooking up with.
I think people who write like urban romance or urban set romance, that you get that with like a neighborhood or with a workplace. Like, I think that's always the thing, right? It's the communities wherever they're set and what you get to like pull from in a community. That's where the drama comes from, because I think Grey's Anatomy is like a small town, but in a hospital.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then Melissa?
Yeah, and for me, I spent the first 20 years of my adult life in a big city.
Yeah.
And when I moved to Maine and I live in a small town, I had no idea that I was going to love it. I do. And in fact, this small town isn't even small enough for me. And I'm going to head north when my son graduates from high school next year. And I just really like it. And so that's one of the reasons why I love setting my books in small towns, and especially like when they're under 1,000 people. I find that really fun. But it's just like that sense of community and knowing everyone, but in a good way. So yeah, I love that setting. I think people are drawn to it just familiarity and just because it's like Stars Hollow.
Yeah.
From Gilmore Girls. I think that's maybe what people envision.
Yeah, and I think it's, it's so interesting. You have the experience of going from a big, you were in New York for many years. That like doesn't get any like bigger and more crazy than that. And then to go to the rural setting, I think you can really tap into what it is that attracts people to. You all do such a beautiful job of that. So just a reminder to the audience, like throw questions in. We're going to talk for a couple more minutes and then want to open it up to give you guys a chance to also ask questions while we have these wonderful authors here. So speaking of tropes and, Macy, you were talking about forced proximity and sort of, those things. What are your favorite tropes to write? RaeAnne?
Oh, I get to start again.
Okay, we'll mix it up next question. Don't worry.
No, it's okay. All right. My favorite tropes to write. I really like fish out of water stories, just somebody coming new and having to, sort of what Macy was talking about, having to deal with a situation that they're uncomfortable with. I like the friends to lovers trope very much. I think I've used that a few times. Other than that, I mean, anything. I think I've used probably every possible trope, but I love them all, so it works however I do it.
Love both of those.
And this is where small town is very convenient for me. My favorite tropes, I have realized, always involve one or the other of them having to see each other in a new light. So I love friends to lovers because I love that, oh crap moment where they're like, oh, this is bad because this is not what it's supposed to be. And so I also love like the older brother's best friend where he's like, oh no, like she's not a child anymore. I don't like that at all. So I like that moment where it's like, you were this one thing to me and now you've become kind of this other thing, and having to go through that change in the relationship. So I like it a lot when they have a prior connection, which is why small town romance is so great for me to write, because almost always I can make it so they know each other in some way. But then when I write Harlequin Presents, I like Marriage of Convenience, and it's so much easier to get that into those stories than it is into like a contemporary, although I have kind of done it before in a cowboy romance, it is a lot trickier to come up with the excuses, because I can't be like, because it's the law of my fake country and I made it.
I'm sensing a theme here. You're godlike complex. You like
Yes,
to make the rules. And Melissa?
Oh, for me, my very favorite babies. You know, I love babies in romances. I always have a single parent, either the hero or the heroine. There's always a baby. I just love them, and I love what they bring to the story and the conflict. And I also, coupled with that, I love a Cinderella story.
Mm.
And I find that that's always sort of an underpinning. And also the cowboy redemption story. That is my favorite, maybe even my favorite to read.
So let's talk about cowboys, because I love that as a subgenre of romance. Similar to the small town, what do you guys think attracts readers to cowboys? And we're going to go in a different order this time. So Macy, I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, you know, I've thought a lot about this because, again, it's like, so it seems like maybe I write very different things in my romance, because I write billionaires, kings over here and cowboys over here. And I kind of had the realization they're not actually different. They are, a cowboy is kind of a law unto himself. He's got his own property, and that's kind of where his, not wealth necessarily, but where it kind of his wealth is in the land. So it's slightly different than like a billionaire businessman or a king. But in that sense, they kind of are self-sufficient. They're a little bit outside of regular society. Like, you think of a cowboy, you think of like, he's got old-fashioned charm. He's maybe a bad boy, but he's a good man. Like, you can have kind of a cowboy with a bad boy swagger, but he's got that kind of core values of, opening the door for a lady or whatever kind of a thing. So you got that sense of the old fashioned kind of with it as well. And just like, he's a little bit different than everybody else. And I think a little bit outside of the rules. And that's kind of what I like about them, is that very, that kind of, I don't know, they've got that swagger, they've got that like, that just kind of extra thing. And you think like, yeah, if things go down, you could like hide out on his ranch and he'd take care of you. That's kind of the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Melissa, you're back on, because we're going in a new order now.
Yeah, well, I completely agree there with everything I just heard. I love the cowboy stories. And I think, when I think of a cowboy, I think of that rugged, sexy man in a Stetson, silhouetted against the setting sun on a ranch, and he's walking a horse to the barn, or he's on the back of a bull, and he's heroic, and he's all about the code of the West and utmost respect for women, and he's all about integrity and honesty. I grew up with a mom who just loved those old like spaghetti westerns, so I just always had that in me. And I just love the cowboys.
Yes, absolutely. RaeAnne?
Okay, so ditto what they said. It's hard being last, I agree. But I would say, there, as we talked about old-fashioned values, I think that's one of the things that is appealing. You kind of think that, I live in a town where there's cowboys, and they're not all that sexy when you know them. Sometimes they are, but you see the reality of it, and it's not always what they are in romance novels. But there's the idea that they're going to make the right choices all the time, and that they're going to do the right thing, and that they'll be there to rescue somebody who might need it, or they'll just be an example to people. They're just good men. And that's kind of, and like Melissa was talking about, my dad was a big Western fan, so I grew up watching those with him. Some of my most cherished memories are of that, and there's just something about that idealized image of a cowboy that is just romantic, I think. And I haven't written a cowboy in a long time, but I need to get back there and write a few more, I think.
I think so too.
I just, like, I know I'm stealing another spot, but it was interesting because I drive around and I dictate and drive just to get out and get away from the computer, and I'll drive up in the hills and stuff. And when kind of everything was on lockdown, I was driving around. We weren't on, I was allowed to drive around and stuff, but I looked out, and at the ranch there were a bunch of the cowboys who had come to like help each other do some stuff with the, I won't get graphic, do some stuff with the steers on the ranch, and they were there working outside and kind of doing their thing. And I remember thinking, but this is the thing, when you work with the land, you just keep going, because you follow kind of the rhythm of the land, and you follow this, you know, the work's got to get done. You get up and you do this, and you're a steward of what you've been given, and you do this thing. And I just thought that to me spoke again to the appeal of cowboys. There's something constant about it. There's something connected kind of to nature in a way. And I think, you know, that's what I think of, is that like that connection to the land as well. And I actually found that really comforting.
I love that. That is such a beautiful note to transition into our rapid fire questions. Thank you guys so much for sharing all of that. So we're just gonna have some fun, get to know authors in a different way. So we're gonna go Macy, Melissa, RaeAnne. Okay. Okay, these are just rapid fire. Don't think about them too much. Here we go. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Coffee.
Neither. Sorry.
Okay, alternative. What's your go-to?
I drink water. I drink Diet Coke. I drink hot cocoa.
Awesome. Okay, cake or pie?
Cake.
Cake and pie.
Okay, good. I like that.
Pie.
Yes.
I'm a pie person.
Are you guys plotters or pantsers?
Both.
I'm a plotter who wants to be a pantser, and it's never happened in 20 years, but I'm trying.
I would say both as well, but mostly a plotter.
I heard this term recently, plotster. That's
Yeah, I just think it sounds horrible.
It does sound horrible.
I've heard
so
it
I'm
too,
not gonna say
but
it. Okay, vampires or mermaids?
mermaids.
I have a mermaid. I don't know if you can see it right above my head on top of my desk. Yeah, definitely mermaids.
Okay.
Talisman.
Mermaids.
Yes. I knew I liked you guys. Okay, would you guys rather have writer's block or be in a reading slump?
I'd rather be in a reading slump, because at least if I could write a book that I wanted to read.
Oh, that's a good point. I'm going to say writer's block, because I don't even think I've ever had a reader's slump. I don't want that.
Lucky you.
I would say I'd rather have a reading slump, because the idea of a writer's block just terrifies me.
Yes. What's your favorite snack?
Chips.
Cheddar
Yes.
chips.
Buttered popcorn.
Oh yes, good one. I have a kettle corn addiction, and I've been like, my husband has cut me off. He's like, you can't buy it. It's a problem. Okay, what are you currently reading?
I'm between books right now. I just finished Forget Me Not by Brenda Jackson for my romance book club that I'm in at our local bookstore. I run a book club with Megan Crane, who also writes as Caitlin Cruz. She's another Harlequin author. And that was a really great book. That was an amnesia story about a husband and a wife, and the husband lost his memory and the wife thought he was dead, and then she sees him on the street and like falls into the water, and he doesn't remember who she is, and he rescues her. And it was really fantastic and like very like dramatic and like high fantasy, which is all stuff I love. And then I'm about to start a Sophie Jordan historical called While the Duke Was Sleeping, but I'm like in between.
Oh, fun. Great. I feel like the amnesia trope needs to come back a little bit more.
Agreed.
It's dipped and I really like it. I love it. Okay, Melissa, what are you currently reading?
I'm reading The Friendship List by Susan Mallory. And I'm also reading a special edition by Joe McNally that I really just love.
Oh, fantastic. RaeAnne.
I just finished a couple of books for blurbs that I'm doing, but the one that I'm actually reading right now on my own it's actually nonfiction by Timothy Egan. It's about him being a pilgrim, not on the main pilgrimage that people take, but the one that's in Rome, or it goes from France to Italy, and it's kind of like a travel book and really interesting.
Oh, cool.
I can't remember the name of it, but Timothy Egan's the author.
Oh, very cool. Okay, what's been the best splurge during quarantine?
I got like a real espresso machine. because my husband and I both used to make coffee. That's not where we met, but we got to know each other working together at a coffee house. And so we both know actually how to make coffee, and we got ourselves a real espresso machine, and we are so happy.
That is such a good one, because it is like, when you can't really like enjoy.
Yeah, we don't live in town, and so with everything and neither of us work in town, we work at home. So with our kids not going to school, we were like, we're not even driving near Starbucks, which is great, and this is going to pay for itself in not an embarrassingly short amount of time.
That's great. Melissa?
My splurge was a weighted blanket.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, I don't love it.
Mm-hmm.
I did spend the money. But yeah, it's I don't really love it, but I like the concept of it.
Yeah, we've tried one for everyone in the family. I'm the only one who like kind of likes it. It does help, I will say, but it's also like, it's a little constricting. But
Yeah.
yes, the concept of it as well. RaeAnne?
Well, I feel guilty talking about this one because we were actually doing this before the quarantine, but we were building a second house in southern Utah, and so we finished it during the quarantine, and so we've been down there like numerous times, and it's a big splurge, but it's
absolutely deserved. First of all, you've written like 50 books. You can have your home in southern Utah, and second of all, that is amazing. Like, to be able to escape southern Utah, if you've never been, is truly like one of the most spectacular.
It is.
Oregon,
amazing.
Wyoming, Maine, you guys are like nailing all of the most beautiful places, like my favorite places in the US. So yeah, that is awesome. So good. We got our pool heated. We have a pool that was not heated and so not usable, even though it was hot here. So that was our huge splurge, so don't feel bad. Okay, final rapid fire question. And then we do have a question from the audience, which is great. What word do you always spell wrong?
I don't spell any words wrong because I dictate. So I have a homonym issue because it doesn't always know what I mean, but man, that has solved the spelling problems. But I think that the copy editors must think I really don't know like English, because I don't, I'm not a perfectionist, regrettably. So I'm like, I'm bored now, so you can read through this. And then, yeah, so they get a lot of things that like, there's a lot of their problems. And it's like, I know it, but like Dragon doesn't really know it. And I'm not anal enough to like catch it all. So yeah, I make my copy editor work overtime.
Yeah, for me, it's the CS words like license and absence. Never get them right.
I struggle with those too, but rhythm, I can never spell it right. Every time I use it, I have to like, okay, what? RHY, but then what comes next?
I always spell definitely wrong. I always spell it defiantly, which is so annoying. And it doesn't correct because it's like, this is a word. And I'm like, okay, we have a couple questions from the audience. So Wendy asks, can you all share your daily writing process? Do you have specific hours during which you work and stop working? So we'll start with, we're going to switch it up for audience question. Melissa, you can go first.
Well, when my son he's going into his senior year of high school. So when he was in school at regular hours before school just ended in March, I had very set writing hours. Like I would start, he left at 8, I would write from 8 till 3 when he would come home. So that would just be my set hours. And then the pandemic just changed everything for me. I had to just sort of adapt to a new schedule and learning to write when I really wouldn't want to. I'm a morning person. I wake up at 5 and I can't work at night, but I had to force myself to. So it's been interesting. I've had to adapt the process, and I'm glad it is adaptable.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And RaeAnne?
That was my schedule as well when I had my kids in school. So we have a son with special needs and who requires total care. And so he would go to a program and I would work while he was gone, but he's been home with just my husband and I since the quarantine. And then we have another one that's a senior as well. And so I sort of, right now my husband's with them for a couple of hours during the day and I just scramble during those hours, and then I'll go back at night after we get our son asleep and work during that time, and hopefully do what I can in between there. If I need to do social media things, I'll do that when I'm here with them.
I feel incredibly spoiled because more or less things stayed the same for me. I have 3 kids and they're 10, 12, and 14. So they're all in school, and my 2 of my kids that can work independently would go, I live next door to my parents. So we just had them in our quarantine the whole time. So just they're over the fence. So my 2 kids that could work by themselves on the computer would go over there. I also have a son with special needs, and my husband would just sit at the computer with him and do school with him because he cannot do it independently. And normally he had an aide that would go to school with him, but that wasn't happening when everybody was locked down. So he would sit there and do the school, and I was able to work basically my normal hours, which are essentially at 8 to 4. And that's kind of ideal. We've had to do a lot more working around each other than normal because we've had kids home. So normally if one of us wants to go do something, the kids are at school, and that's not been the case. And there are, we're pretty well, you can go like to the doctor or whatever, and chiropractor and things like my husband needs to go do that. I'm like, oh, that's in the middle of the workday. So now we're kind of doing this. So there's been a lot more of that, but it's still like my routine has been able to be like pretty well the same. We are also building a house, but it's not a second house, it's just our house. And we're living next door in a smaller house, but my office is still here on the next door property. So I'm like able to get away and have it be super quiet. So I actually I have felt very, very, very spoiled and very grateful for the way that things are set up, because I've been able to kind of maintain my routine, because I have a daily word count that I like to make sure I hit, and I like to do it that's my ideal. Like, ask me how often everything goes fully according to plan, and that's a different story.
That's amazing. It's so nice to have family nearby that can help you. So the next question is, do you have any rituals or habits you must do before you start to write?
Is that me?
Where we start?
Yes, Melissa. Sorry.
Well, the only thing I have a dog, so I always have to take him out. And mentally, I know I don't start until I've walked him, or taken him on his hike in the woods. But then I come home and I have to listen to Adele. Mm-hmm. And once I listen to my Adele song, and right now it's the song Remedy, and then I can get right into my book. And I have a book due on September 1st. So as long as I start the day with Remedy, I could get right into it.
Oh, I love that. That's great.
I don't really have any triggers, but I have like certain chairs I like to sit in when I work. I have a hard time working in other places if I'm not in that particular chair. I do like to light a candle just if I'm writing a Christmas book, it's a pine scented candle. If it's not a Christmas book, it's something else that has to do with that particular book. And I like music. Sometimes I like music, sometimes I like quiet. Just depends on my mood and whether I'm dictating a rough draft at the time. I only do my rough drafts, but it just depends where I am in the process, whether I listen or not.
Oh, okay. Oh, I love that.
I find that I'm very much subject to whatever's going on with a particular book. So like some books, I can never focus enough to sit at my desk, because then I'll like switch back and forth between, like, I'll get beyond the internet too much. And so that's when I dictate and drive. Because I find that kind of, much like taking a shower or like going for a walk, if I'm doing like a rural drive, it just kind of focuses me, and I can just go blah, 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 and like get it out. And then I have to go spend some time editing, but that helps me. But some books, like I sit at my desk and I dictate a really clean copy that I'm looking at the whole time, rather than like this garbage stuff that I do while I'm driving. And I do a little bit at a time and kind of slow and steady it. And some books I fast draft and they're a disaster, and then I have to do tons of editing. So for me, it's like whatever gets the book done. And I like dream of a like tranquil schedule with like, where I'm like, I know how it'll go this time, but in over 100 books that has not managed to occur. So like, I'm just kind of like, well, it's going to get done how it gets done. No points for the process being pretty, and no points for a good attitude.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much. We are out of time. That went so fast. I wanted to, so Maisey, Melissa, and RaeAnne, thank you so much. I do want to remind everyone to visit bookstoreromanceday.org and support your local indie. I'm just going to quickly, because Bookstore Romance Day is so awesome and I want to make sure everyone knows what it's about, just quickly read so everyone's aware, and you can go visit for more information. So it was created in 2019 as a way to create a love match between independent bookstore and the romance community. It was a classic enemies to lovers tale. For too long, indies weren't embracing romance books, as we all know. But now, with this initiative, we're on our way to our very own HEA. So thank you guys so much for joining us. And don't forget the gift with purchase opportunity. There are links in the chat. And go and purchase books from these amazing authors. I, for one, am definitely going to go down a cowboy rabbit hole with you guys, and just so appreciate you spending Saturday with us from all of your beautiful rural locations that I'm so jealous of right now. I can't even tell you. While I am like traffic outside my LA window, but I appreciate you guys so much, and it was lovely to chat with you, and thank you guys for joining in the chat and watching, and have a wonderful rest of your weekend and your Bookstore Romance Day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.